I would love to be able to pinpoint this and say, this is oxalates, like we can with a kidney stone. This is oxalates. This is oxalates. So one of my questions for you is there a way, now that we know a little more, to identify that it is or it isn't?
Yeah, see, the tough thing here is you don't find what you're not looking for. And so in terms of the research, here's how it goes. So researchers will look for oxalate in the body when the kidneys have failed, but they don't look before then.
They're right.
And so we know from the research on people who have oxalosis, where they are essentially toxic with oxalate. And that can be either because of primary hyperoxaluria, where their body's producing oxalate, or because they've got some kind of an acute poisoning with oxalate, which can happen with diet. When people have oxalosis, they will look for it elsewhere, but they kind of stumble into oxalosis only when renal information, renal tests show that kidney function is low. Then they'll go looking for it elsewhere, but up until that point. So there's only very limited research where we've got people who are actually saying, look, oxalate's the issue here, and people are not yet in kidney failure or having reduced renal function, and they've actually looked. And so there's a few pieces of research that I know of, one which has to do with the joints and arthritis, which I believe the title of the research was Update on Crystal Oxalate Disease or something to that effect. You could probably find it that way. And essentially what the researchers suggest is if you've got somebody who's got arthritis and it seems odd, like you can't pinpoint a diagnosis or it doesn't act the way you'd expect it to, that they should be looking for calcium oxalate crystals in the joints. So that's one piece where they weren't looking at the kidneys first and saying, well, if the kidneys are good, everything's fine. And there's another piece of research, and this has to do with breast health, where they identified that oxalate's actually a trigger to breast cancer, and that crystal microcalcifications in the breast can be oxalate. And that one, I do not know why the world is not blowing up on that particular.
Really?
Because breast cancer is another one of those things that we consider epidemic. And what if what we're doing to be healthier is actually making us less well? And no one wants to answer that question in a research sense in terms of oxalate unless the kidneys are starting to fail. And that's
too late.
That's way too long afterwards, right? I ended up being, toxic enough with oxalate by 48 that I knew I wasn't right. I figured I was on my way to a fibromyalgia diagnosis or something because I just had so much stuff going on, or a chronic fatigue kind of diagnosis. But if I'd have continued on that trajectory, by the time they find it and the kidneys are starting to suffer, you're already been dealing with oxalate for maybe decades. And the idea that we can absorb it, and as a toxin, it's a completely get out of jail free kind of toxin. It just passes through and heads out. And we never show an ounce of curiosity what might be happening between absorption and excretion. To me, it's just astonishing that we aren't willing to even ask the questions. I'm really surprised by the lack of curiosity.